And what I got was, and many of you have heard this story, so I apologize, but when I was in college, I was able to save $500 worth of beer money. And I like beer. So that was a real victory for me. And with that, I bought, and you ladies will know what I'm talking about, a remarkably sexy Datsun 210. Now this is a chick-mobile. This was cracked windshield, faded red paint, went 0 to 50 in under 15 minutes. It was incredible. This is awful. It was incredible. Women loved it. When it rained, water would pool on the passenger side, to the point where I needed to take a hammer and nail and poke a hole in the floorboard to let it drain. And I'm driving around with my girlfriend at the time, and I said, you know, you're a lucky lady. We drove up next to a guy in a Lexus, and I said, you know, you could be with him instead of me. And she didn't think that was funny. I thought it was hysterical. But I said, don't really think about this. There's no road that is open to him that is now closed to me. There's no place he can go that I cannot go for $500. I have freedom. What I bought for $500 was freedom and the ability to direct my own life. I was able to hold down a job, start my own business, go to college, do all these things with a $500 used car, which as an evil Republican I kept for 8 years and sold for $950. But what was fascinating about it is it really got me to think about the power of mobility, the power of being able to go where you need to go, when you need to go. And I shortly came to a realization. Many in our movement work on vouchers, work on education, and that's terrific. We should be working on mobility. In fact, I believe mobility is more crucial to the American dream than education. You can learn a lot on your own, but you show me a man who's limited to how far his legs will take him, and I will show you a man in despair, no matter how well educated he is. And so that started a lifelong obsession with mobility, transportation. I would see, and you'll still see them, people sitting on the side of the road waiting for a government-owned conveyance to come at the government schedule to take them where the government thinks they should go. And when I see these people, and I'm not talking about yuppies who keep their car at home because they don't want to play parking at a Rockies game. I'm talking about people who have no other choice. And I say these are people who forever will be on the lower rung of the American dream. These are the people who need mobility. And so not only did I run for the RTD, which supposedly was there to help those people, but I've quickly found out the only thing that RTD is concerned about moving around is money from one crony to another crony and out of your pockets. They don't care about those transit-dependent people. And I worked for years trying to change laws, to allow competition to RTD, to allow for something like transit vouchers, to break up the taxi cartel, to allow even for carpooling for profit, sharing that empty seat right there and getting a little bit of money for it. I tried, and every time I went to the State House, every time I went to the State Senate, we brought forward ideas, and every time we were shut down, flat. Never got a single thing out of committee, period. It was discouraging. And then, years later, one day, I learned about Uber. I learned about Uber. These morons typing at a computer created what I dreamt of for years. They saw this wall of bureaucracy. I don't even know if they saw the wall of bureaucracy. They just digitized themselves right around it with a disruptive technology that gave us what I dreamt of for 25 years and delivered it in the pocket of each one of you that has a smartphone. That disruption blew my mind. And then little anarchists like Justin over here starts planting these seeds that, you know, what we need is that we need not an incremental approach, not this incremental approach where you go down and you try to make these little changes here and these little changes there. We need massive disruption, and Uber, in my mind, is the best example of disruption that is saving people's lives and blowing apart a taxi cartel, blowing apart a government monopoly, and helping people. And so we get into this fight of, well, isn't that what we should be working for? These disruptive technologies, this disruption, and that is the anarchist dream. This is...
Ian's getting an Amber alert. I just got mine, but Amber alert. Government got on my phone! Government's on my phone! Get off my phone! Get off my phone,
It might save one child, Justin. Come on.
All right, you cynics. Hang on a second. Wait till that's your daughter, and then you'll feel differently about that Amber Alert. And so I am now more attuned to this anarchist notion of massive disruption, of massive change, that we don't need to play this political game that we've been playing and losing for years. And screw Justin, I now own Bitcoin.
Yay!
And damn it, my one little Bitcoin is going to take me into retirement. But I want to try a different side of that. My point being, I understand the very real idea that you need massive change. And that massive change doesn't come through government, it comes from going around government. And it comes from making government obsolete. That perhaps technology will make government obsolete, and we'll be able to live the dream that we have to be free individuals and direct our own destinies. I get that. But I want to put up a counter to that. And that counter to that goes something like this. There are people who wish to have that Uber ride, and they can't. And it's not because the technology is not available to them, is that fighting the system to make it available is nearly impossible because of the regulatory state. That I went to Kansas City the other day, and I was able to get an Uber that came right to the, or a Lyft right to the airport. I've gone to other airports where I'm fuzzed out. Why am I fuzzed out and I can't get an Uber there? It's not because the technology won't work. It's not because the demand won't work. It's because Uber hasn't been able to do those incremental changes to get government off their backs enough to compete. So it might be wonderful that we have Uber, but there are still people who are being denied that freedom. That's why it matters. Because while government still has the guns and can stop us from living our lives, I believe we need to engage on a two-front war. That one war being the disruption that we're all looking for, a way of making government obsolete because nobody cares anymore, but also it takes something to make sure that that technology, that idea, is able to work in government. Incremental change makes huge differences, including in politics. Let's think a little bit, and I'm amazed by the gay rights movement. I mean, I'm fascinated that in a matter of a couple of decades, we've gotten to the point where these people can live their lives the way they should without fear of government putting them in jail. And I think back on one of my heroes. And it's weird to think that Thomas Jefferson was, as a state legislator in Virginia, proposed a law that if anyone was caught being homosexual, the punishment would be castration.
Sure.
Let's think about this. The founder of our country, the one who wrote this law, was the one who pushed for a law that said they should be castrated. All right, I think to all of our sensibilities, that's just wrong. I celebrate that. he made a huge movement. Why? Because what we don't know is that the law on the books before he proposed that was that if you found someone who was gay, he was to be executed. This, for me, is the perfect example of an incremental change that saved lives, that brought us a little bit closer to our goal. Is it something we should be proud of or celebrate? No, of course not. But it's something that shows change in the right direction. There are 1,000 kids in Jefferson County who go to a little place called Golden View Academy, a brand new charter school that is a back to basics, freedom-loving, liberty-loving school, very much like what Congressman Bob Schaefer put up at Fort Collins with Liberty High School. Now, there are 1,000 lives that have been saved through this school. How is it that that happened? Because some people put in a school board on a 3-to-5 vote that allowed the funding to happen. It saved lives today. Now, we could argue we should wait until there's a disruptive technology, that there's a way to get around it. But the fact of the matter is, until government gives up their guns and lets us live our lives, we must fight on a two-front war. Which is why I've dedicated my life at Independence Institute to building, I hope, a machine that helps on both fronts. One, an ideological organization that says, this is where we need to go. And then another one that says, God, I hope they find you, Justin.
Turn it off! You still care about it.
You turn it off and
Really
it's
gentle with her. Let's go find her. Come on.
Sure it was over.
only Justin would do that. So I take a look at Colorado. In Colorado, growing up here, and maybe you felt differently, Colorado always felt like liberty somehow was just all around us. It grew up out of the ground. Maybe you youngins don't know what we're talking about, but I remember growing up here, and you didn't talk about liberty, but there was a sense of, you do what you want to do, I'm going to do what I want to do. We write our own autobiographies. One of the great stories I heard was a record producer who did Earth, Wind, and Fire, among other hits in the 70s. He worked in Chicago. And Earth, Wind, and Fire did a song called Spinning Wheel, what goes up must come down, whatever it is. And have you ever noticed that in the center of that song, there's this weird cut where it goes oompa, oompa, and it just makes no sense at all. He explained it once. He said, in Chicago, I had to do these records, but it was a union facility. I couldn't touch the mixing console. They hired somebody who was union to be able to do that. We cut the record. I'm working on finishing the track, putting all the elements together. The band is long gone. We're doing this song, and we're re-recording it onto this reel. And the union worker is reading a newspaper while it's happening and hits a bad switch and starts erasing the master tape, the only tape. This guy, and I'm forgetting his name, jumps over the console, tries to stop it, but there's this 10-15 second empty space now in something that they just spent so much work on. And he had to come up with an idea to try to put in this oompa, oompa, or something to fill that. And he said, at that point, I realized, I gotta get out of here. I gotta go to some place where I'm, and this is his term, where I'm free to do my work the way I want to do my work. And then he bought the, up near Netherland, the Caribou Ranch, thank you. Alzheimer's sucks. He bought Caribou Ranch, from which Michael Jackson recorded, and John Lennon, Elton John, and all the rest. And he did that because he needed freedom. I still believe Colorado is basically a libertarian place, that people want that we are socially tolerant and we hate government regulation. I think we've gotten off track. And we've gotten off track because the other side understands incrementalism. They are there and ever pervasive, and if there's an opportunity to move just a little bit towards statism. They are there to fill that void at every election, at every school board meeting, at every zoning board meeting. We, however, are AWOL. We're not there. We don't fight that fight. Why? Because we're waiting for the big disruption. That big disruption will be put down by them if we're not playing that game to some degree as well. And playing that game has real benefits. RTD is half competitively contracted. Now this is a small thing from the anarchist world, but it's an idea that Independence Institute brought forward years ago. The idea that RTD doesn't need to run every single bus, they can contract out that service. And we were able to pass a law back in the 90s that did just that. And you know what we found? That the savings was considerable. 20% of the service was now contracted. When I got on the board, they almost ended the program. The one thing that I think I did well was to save that program. Now 50% by law, by mandate, is competitively contracted. Same buses, same uniforms, same time schedule. But there's a 40% savings. 40% savings. Yeah, I know we're talking about margins. Why is there a 40% savings? People say, well, because they're abusing those poor workers. Well, partly, they get paid less. But it's work rules. On the RTD union, if a bus driver drives the bus into the bus barn, he leaves. Another guy comes in to clean up the bus. If that guy finds out that there's a reading lamp that's out, he fills out a work order, and yet another level of union guy comes in to fix the reading lamp. That's what happens. The private sector, in order to be competitive, one guy does the same thing. At RTD, you can only hire somebody for an 8-hour to 10-hour shift instead of the peak times. So that's why every single RTD union contract requires pool tables to be put at the union facilities, so when they're hanging out on our dime, they can play pool. Well, what has this done? This savings has increased services, sadly to give us light rail, which is a government monopoly, but also to give new bus service to people who need it. Is that a good step in the right direction? Yeah, I think so. But I think for some anarchists, they say you're only moving around deck chairs on the Titanic. These deck chairs on the Titanic have given somebody a ride to work. I think that's worthwhile. So as we go through with this battle of, do we wait for the big explosion and we go all Atlas shrugged and out comes this beautiful new society? While we're all waiting for that, people are still living their lives. And until we're ready to do this, we need to still engage in politics, particularly freedom-minded, libertarian-minded individuals. Here's what's so odd. We're all waiting for that moment where we play that Red Dawn moment, where we grab our AR-15s and we take to the streets to fight back for our liberty. And we'll die in the streets with our AR in our hand because we love liberty. But none of us would go join the zoning board or the PTA or the library committee. Why? Because by comparison, dying in the streets with your AR is so much more pleasant than doing that. I'm arguing if only we did a bit more of that, the ideas of Ubers coming through would not be shut down by the Public Utility Commission as they tried to shut them down here in Colorado. The reason Uber and Lyft are here in Colorado is because organizations like Independence Institute was there to run interference at the Public Utilities Commission in order to make sure they didn't use their authority with guns to stop them from using this great disruption that they've had. And with that, let me say, we've got to fight this on two fronts. We must not forget our goals. We've also got to get involved. And with that, I'd love to get some questions and back and forth on this. So.